Live now. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? It's your boy, Dr. Will, and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show. All right, it has come. I've talked about it for weeks in prior shows, but here we are today. We are here with Kat Prince, y'all, from KnowledgeWorks. How are you doing, Kat?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you today?
I am doing quite well. Thanks for asking. I am feeling a lot better. We are on our spring break, and I happen to have been sick the whole spring break. Uh, and so today I was finally like, I can leave the house. My voice is back, so I'm feeling pretty good.
It's a shame it coincided with your break.
I know, I know, but all is well, and so here we are. So for those people who are checking the show out and they're wondering, who is Katherine Prince? Maybe they haven't seen you on YouTube or on Twitter and unfamiliar with all the work you're doing. Introduce yourself to.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I work as Senior Director of Strategic Foresight at KnowledgeWorks. KnowledgeWorks is based in Cincinnati, Ohio, and is a nonprofit social enterprise that works to cultivate meaningful college and career readiness for all children, meaningful personalized learning in support of college and career readiness, as well as life in general. And I lead our work on looking at the future of learning, so looking 10 years out and helping education stakeholders around the country imagine how trends that are shaping the field today might impact learning that far out, and think about strategic possibilities for steering them to create what they want for kids and make learning better for kids.
Awesome, awesome. So let's jump into it. Now, I first came to know about you watching your TEDx talk on
Mm-hmm.
personalized learning. Very powerful. So check it out,
Thank
y'all. There's
you.
going to be a link to this post as well. So how did that come about, and how do you define personalized learning?
Sure. So I live in Columbus, Ohio, and Professor David Staley at Ohio State University, with whom I keep in touch because he also does futures work around learning, was on the organizing committee for Columbus this past year, and I said, hey, would you be interested, and help me kind of develop a proposal that kind of met the overall aims of the program. And I was lucky enough that the program committee accepted it. So it was a good challenge, and he specifically asked me to think about my personal vision for the future of learning, not a generic future or an agnostic future that I might present to others. So that was a stretch and a fun one. And really, generally, I define personalized learning as learning that really puts the kids at the center, is driven by each child's interests, still in collaborative settings when appropriate, but very much paced at the needs of the individual. Hopefully, some degree of individual say in terms of how a student is mastering learning objectives, based, in order to reflect interest, be relevant and authentic. But still very rigorous, aligned to college and career ready standards, and supported by educators in meaningful ways.
Okay. So every educator is drawn to a particular methodology or philosophy. What drew you to personalized learning, and how does personalized learning align with your personal beliefs about the future of education?
Yeah, so I think started becoming aware of the possibility for greater personalized learning about 10 years ago when I was new to KnowledgeWorks, and KnowledgeWorks had put out our first map of future forces affecting education. So this was back in 2006, and one of the kind of big areas of change that forecast highlight was the possibility for deep personalization to emerge in education. At that time, we were just seeing it kind of hit many other areas of life, increasing personalization of consumer experiences, of consumption of media, that kind of thing. And as we kept, I got more involved in the work, and we kept looking at how the learning ecosystem was expanding. So really, we were starting to transition from a dominant model of education to a more diverse learning ecosystem approach and possibilities. I got really excited about personalized learning because I felt like it was starting to become a realistic vision for how we might be able to steer future trends to really do better by students, to kind of use what was happening in the world to solve some of the intractable problems in education that have been so hard to address. And so how it aligns with my beliefs around the future of learning is, I really personally believe that every child should have access to the best possible learning experiences, and, first be able to be in the right learning setting at that point in time, but then within it, or if it's across settings, depending on what the child needs, really thinking about how do we get each individual the right combination of learning experiences and supports and resources to maximize his or her chance of success.
Okay, so this is where I like to get to the reality, or let's say practicality of when people talk about these new innovations in education.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, personalized learning sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, thumbs up. But
Uh-huh.
what about state standards? What about local and state mandates? Um, how does personalized learning exist within the framework of standardized testing?
Yeah, so there's layers and layers there. So I and KnowledgeWorks believe that personalized learning can be very consistent with very rigorous state level standards. Those are saying this is what we hope all learners will attain. And there can be many paths toward getting there. So within the context of those standards, there could also be some degree of choice, not just in the path toward mastering them, but also in kind of following interests within or beyond them or in parallel to them. Um, state and local mandates can enable or get in the way of personalized learning. That's, it really depends on what's in question, but generally folks who are pursuing it, and we support in our work policies that remove barriers to or specifically encourage the move toward competency education. It's one form of personalized learning. Indeed, as we look toward the future, we could see learning being based on mastering competencies at one's own pace as being a critical vehicle for helping there be many forms of personalized learning. So we think we need to shift policy frameworks and accountability systems to take that into account. I think a lot of educators are finding that it can be very difficult to pursue personalized learning in our current standardized testing climate, which is not to say that there shouldn't be standardized tests and rigorous formative and summative assessments, but that we probably need to think about new forms of quality assurance that are appropriate to and consistent with a personalized learning approach to the whole ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about the new learning opportunities available,
Mm-hmm.
new platforms being created, the realities of poverty, absentee parenting, learner apathy, outdated policies, etc. What is technology's role in producing an equitable system for all learners?
I think technology can play a lot of roles. It's certainly one vector, one factor that can contribute to change, and it needs to be used in context with many others. We wouldn't say it's a panacea, but it can be a useful tool. So specific ways it could help is certainly opening up access to learning resources and experiences that are not available in a specific geography, connecting with people not just with their main learning experiences. Those might still be place-based, and community-based, but possibly kind of augmenting those with access to mentors or extended learning opportunities that might not be available locally. I think there's a critical role in terms of technology, in terms of helping to educators and everyone involved in learning have a better understanding of what's happening with learning. So using much more rigorous and extensive data systems that are looking not just at academic performance, but at learners' whole development as whole people to kind of help understand what's happening with learning in a quicker way than some of our systems do today, and in a more individual way, while of course protecting privacy and being appropriate there, but really helping to have good learning analytics that help all the adults involved in supporting a young person through his or her learning journey understand what's happening with learning so they can also understand how best to support and intervene. Yeah, so those are my first thoughts. It can be technology can be a platform for learning. It can be a connector. It can be critical in surfacing information.
So as we look at putting learners at the center of their own learning, we're talking about shaking up the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
And as we are looking forward to the future of education, what kind of support is needed to assist teachers and administrators in being prepared for such a paradigm shift?
Yeah, it is a huge shift. I mean, we're really talking about getting way beyond education reform, as you point out, toward education transformation and a very different vision for the future. And we realize that that is a huge transformation, and that people who are working in the system need help transitioning themselves and stewarding the system. So we think some of the big levers of change toward that are beginning to foster learning cultures that have more flexibility, greater emphasis on inquiry, play, collaboration, more space for risk-taking and innovation. We see also the need to, for support along the lines of thinking about kind of new structures for learning. What do schools look like? They could look more ways. School might go way beyond the bounds of school as we know it today into communities and online platforms in any number of locations, in any number of combinations. So beginning to take, I think, steps toward that and building connections across different resources locally and beyond can help begin to expand. And we see all of this as kind of a gradual expansion. We know it's not going to happen all at once. And I think educator preparation, both in the initial stages and ongoing development, really need to evolve considerably so that teachers and administrators have support for learning how to work in an expanded learning ecosystem, even as we start to think about educator roles potentially diversifying, getting more specialized. We need to think about how to align those systems behind the roles we need for the future and help the individuals who are coming to education or who are working in it now and have the training and the support and the professional learning communities to get there. So those are just some ways, and we have put out in the fall a paper looking at 10 innovation pathways toward transforming the learning ecosystem. Data and assessment systems are big pieces of it too. I mean, it doesn't really, you can only go so far in a classroom or a school if we don't also change kind of how we're using data, how we're using assessment and accountability systems, as you alluded to in one of your questions, and then thinking too about kind of all the systemic structures. How does funding work? How does policy align? How do we build public will? How do we assure quality in new ways? And how do we get community ownership of learning to really be behind new approaches to learning? So it's definitely a whole system viewpoint that we take and very complex change work.
Okay, so when we think about personalized learning and all the buzz that's surrounding it right now, it's becoming the new hotness in education. And so when we look at it long term, how can personalized learning grow and adapt and be there to meet the individual needs of learners and not become just another fad or trend in education?
Sure. I think it's very important that we don't just go from our general kind of one-size-fits-all industrial system to a one-size-fits-all, which would be hard to do that with personalized, but kind of it works one way, and that's personalized learning. We need to build into the evolving learning ecosystem the ability to adapt and to change quickly for different circumstances, to be resilient, even as it's trying to serve all learners and be vibrant for them and equitable. So I think some of the ways we think about doing that is really thinking about fostering new kinds of interconnections across the learning ecosystem. So we have a project we're working on and about to publish on that's where we ask the question of how can we help the expanding learning ecosystem be equitable and what's going to keep it adaptable over time. And we really see the potential for educators to start thinking more deliberately about a framework we're adapting from the Deloitte Center for the Edge, looking at what kinds of roles need to concentrate, what big platforms or aggregating or brokering services do we need, where do we need really customized niche services that kind of help meet learners exactly where they are, and then where do we need kind of catalyst roles or catalyst services that help set visions, align resources, that kind of thing. So and then to think about different education participants or ecosystem participants really coming together across those roles and combining what they can offer in ways that work in particular geographic settings for particular groups of learners, and then knowing that they might get unbundled and rebundled and adapt in different ways if local needs change or if there's another learner population that needs to be served in a little bit different way. So we start to think about infrastructure in a much more flexible and interconnected way. And we've been really thinking a lot about theories about adaptive change, where thinking about how natural ecosystems are always kind of adapting, adjusting, recombining, and then how might that work in education?
Okay, that sounds All right, I like that. I like it.
It's a lot.
Now, for those educators who are out there and uh, they've read some materials, they're going, okay, I'm warming up to the idea.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe they're watching this show right now and they're going, that Cat Prince is really bringing it today. I like that. Um, and they say to themselves, I really want to learn more about
Mhm.
personalized learning and how it can be implemented either in my classroom or my school. So, what advice do you have for them to explore the possibilities in personalized learning? And uh, you've talked about so many wonderful things, but are there any drawbacks to be considered?
Mhm. Um, I think just not necessarily a drawback, but an overarching caution is that, we're talking about large-scale systemic change that's very difficult and complex. Um, so to really think about trying things out, piloting, prototyping, beginning to take small steps that might move a particular school, a particular classroom, district, wherever the point of might be, toward a more personalized learning environment, knowing that we're going to need to do that, adapting that learning, that evolving of it, and instead of thinking of it has to be, the classroom all the time or the school all the time, the whole district, can there be ways to begin to iterate toward more and more of it and learn as you go? Um, my colleagues Matt Williams, Jesse Moyer, and Sarah Jenkins have recently released a paper called District Conditions for Success. It really focuses on scaling personalized learning. It's based on research they've done with about 30 districts around the country who've been making moves in that direction. And they've drawn out lots of things those districts have been doing, but the kind of themes that span all of those are have a really clear and consistent vision for where you want to take learning, align the culture around it, and be really transparent with all the stakeholders in terms of what you're doing and how you're trying to get there, partly because it does have to be iterative, and stakeholders are going to need help with understanding the new vision, but also tolerating the learn as you go approach. So those are some ideas for moving forward. And I think generally thinking about where can we begin to just loosen things up, maybe shift the culture a little bit, try a new approach to learning that gives learners a little more control or differentiates what's happening in the classroom a little more, developing more meaningful assessments that are really informing learning. Again, our Innovation Pathways paper outlines a lot of ideas toward change, but those are some of the kind of closer in ones that I would see.
Okay, so before we get out of here, and you've this has been nice. I like this. It's been nice. Um, what are your final thoughts? What haven't I asked you that you want to share and touch upon?
Mm-hmm. Um, I just say I'm really excited about the possibilities for making personalized learning really characterize future learning ecosystem, bringing it to all kids, and that so that every kid's getting the right experience. And it could look very similar to what a lot of schools look like today for some kids, and could look very different for other kids. And the point is helping each child have what he or she needs to be successful. One of the biggest concerns I have, and as I look at how the learning ecosystem is expanding, is whether it will be equitable. And we've been focusing a lot of our work lately on that question of how can we help steer the change in a way that will bring the best to everybody and not just to those whose families have the means to find it on their own. So I'd really encourage folks to think about just the reality that not every child or every family is going to be able to figure this out on their own. We're going to need to build in systemic supports for families and learners. So how can we kind of design for that while also knowing that we need to kind of cultivate conditions that also let ecosystems expand and grow on their own and really be living systems.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Now, ladies and gentlemen, again, I would like to thank you for watching another episode of the Dr. Will Show. Here again with Cat Prince. This has been a fantastic show. As always, information will be on the blog. You'll be able to see the video, get more information on how to get in contact with Kat Prince and Knowledge Works as well. So I thank you, Kat, for being a guest on the show, and I hope that you had a great time.
I did. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Will, and I'll look forward to seeing the materials on your site.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, and have a great one.
Thanks. You too.